Welcome to Retail Crime Uncovered, your go-to podcast for anything and everything retail crime related, sponsored by Secura Global. Here is your host, Professor Emmeline Taylor.
Welcome to Retail Crime Uncovered. In this episode's newscast, I'll be joined by Sinead to talk about a new initiative to tackle shoplifting that's been raising quite a few eyebrows. But first, I've had quite a busy July and August visiting Australia and New Zealand, where I was absolutely honoured to keynote at the Profit Protection Future Forum events in Auckland and Sydney, as well as delivering a Retail Crime Uncovered session at the Secura Global Insights 360 event in Melbourne. Now, today's episode is going to draw upon some of the highlights from that trip. I've got interviews with Carolynne Ball. She's from Foodstuffs North Island in New Zealand, and she's been pioneering the way with that business with live facial recognition. I'll also be talking to Scott Harris from Workforce Resilience about critical incidents and the importance of preparedness across the retail sector. I'll also catch up with Secura Global's own David Haylings for his reflections on the Insight 360 event.
Spotlight.
First off, live facial recognition. Now, we've had a special episode of Retail Crime Uncovered on this topic already, but there still is no topic that I think is hotter than this. And in Auckland, I was welcomed by Carolynne Ball, Director at Loss Prevention Services, who's really been the driving force behind the trial of LFR over there in New Zealand. And she very kindly took me on some store visits to see the technology in operation. And Carolynne joins me now for some reflections on the findings of that trial. Welcome, Carolynne. It's so lovely to have you on the show.
Thanks so much.
I guess first off, people don't really think of New Zealand as having, particularly, big crime issues or organised crime or violence. We think of it as this, country full of countryside and vineyards and volcanoes. Could you just set the scene a little bit for us first about why live facial recognition was even being considered in New Zealand?
Yeah, sure. We've had a significant increase over the last few years with aggressive and violent behaviour and harm to our staff, more weapons involved than we've ever seen before, and just generally really bad behaviour. And COVID was the start of it because we were locked down, especially in Auckland, several times and for a while. And people, the first lockdown was fine, but after that, people just turned quite nasty, and it just was a continuation of that. And we've probably had an increase in gang crime and organised retail theft, which hasn't been a huge issue in New Zealand before. But with that type of crime does tend to come violence and aggression. So
for me, what seems to set this trial apart was just how transparent you were from the outset, engaging with customers, bringing the privacy commissioner on board. Was that always a key strategy to be like, we've got nothing to hide here. Have a look yourselves about what we're looking to deploy?
Yes, always. Yeah, we wanted to engage a privacy commissioner because we wanted to do it properly. We didn't want to get to the end of a trial and have it fail because, we weren't compliant. So we've been engaged with the Office of the Privacy Commissioner for several years before we started the trial because we got sort of held up along the way and we had to decide on the number of stores. When we originally went out with an expression of interest to stores, there were 76 stores that wanted to put their name forward. And then they asked us to appoint an independent evaluator to oversee the trial. So there was no bias there with the results. So we did that, and they suggested we randomised and the 76 stores, and half would be in the trial and half would just be control stores. So we'd compare statistics with those. But
fantastic.
Yeah, then the OPC asked us to reduce the number of stores. So we ended up with 25, and we just basically used trial sites. The control stores, we didn't find much benefit. And then those 25 stores were randomised. So they weren't necessarily the stores with the highest crime. So, some of those stores had very low. Some of them probably had 10 alerts during the 6-month period of the trial compared to some others that might have had 300. So it was a very balanced selection of stores, not necessarily those that had the most crime.
So you appointed this independent evaluator. What did they find then? I think there were some quite positive results. A 16% reduction in violent incidents.
Yes, which is high considering that some of the stores hadn't had a lot of alerts and didn't, have a lot of violent crime to start with. These were owners that put their names forward because they may have had one person in their store, that had suffered abuse from somebody or aggression or an assault. So, compared with so everybody created their own watch lists with previous offenders, and some of those stores have over 300. Some of them have 30 offenders on their watch list. So yeah, it's varied, but we were pleased with the 16%. But in reality, if we'd have picked our highest crime stores, we would have got far higher percentage.
Let's just talk about that watch list then, because it's quite interesting how it's being utilised there. But I guess first off, how does somebody find themselves on the watch list? What do they have to have done? Do they need to have been convicted? Does it need to have been, what's the decision-making process on who can put somebody on the watch list and for what?
Yeah, so every store has a store champion and they're responsible in the store for the watch list, and I audit the watch list. So to start off, there's no minors in the watch list, and there's also nobody that is a vulnerable person. So somebody in a wheelchair, somebody who's, who we know is a vulnerable member of society. People who are in our watch lists are people that have been violent, abused staff. We get a lot of people treat, especially our younger and foreign staff, extremely badly. So they will be enrolled if they abuse a staff member, because stores won't tolerate that. If they've come into the store with a weapon, if they've assaulted anybody or acted in any violent or aggressive manner. Somebody that comes in and steals $50 worth of groceries would never be enrolled in the watch list unless they steal $50 worth of groceries often. So if they're a repeat offender, they may be put in, depending on their behaviour. And we go through and audit that. We make sure that the stores have the correct notes. And if somebody came in and abused a staff member and absolutely regretted it and came back the next day and said, look, I'm just having a bad day, there's a process to take them off the watch list.
Wow.
So they can apply to be taken off as well.
Yeah. We often don't think about the removal of the list, do we? We just think about how people end up on it. What happens when somebody who generates a match comes through the door and, the alarm sounds on the facial recognition system? What's the process then?
Yeah, so they all have a handheld device. Some stores have two. And so every minute the store's open, somebody has to have the device with them. So if we only had it when a security guard was working, it's not justification for the use of facial recognition, because the purpose of it is you catch somebody as soon as possible before they enter the store, or as they're entering the store. We've found that they're approaching them straight away. We have very little cases that turn aggressive. So that's the point in which you want to catch
really
them. So what
early
happens,
intervention.
the early intervention is key. So the alarm will go off on the device, and it's quite loud, and stores can't alter the noise on the device. So it certainly lets you know that something's happening there. The faces flash up, so the enrolled photo and the photo of the person who's just come in, and it's an image, it's not moving video. So that the security person or the duty manager, whoever has the device, approaches, they get a verification. So they go to another trained staff member to make sure that they both believe it's the same person. So that eradicates a little bit of the racial bias commentary that has been going on, because it doesn't matter what race the person is. They're looking at the person who's enrolled and the person who's picked up. So we will always have a human intervention.
You always need that human verification. And from what I understand, they've been trained as well. It's not just that you could go up to anybody and say, hey, do you think this is a match? It has to be a specifically trained individual.
Yes, ideally another security person, but there's not always two in store, and there's not always one in store. So we've had to, it's been quite an exercise in training people to deal with conflict now that haven't had to deal with it before. So duty managers that would have, normally not had to have this responsibility in stores, they have to now. So that's
Yeah.
been beneficial as well, because it's,
Mm.
the more people I think that know how the system works and why we've got it, the better.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a number of people in each stores that are trained to do this. So
Mm.
the alert goes off, we approach a person, and we give them the date they were trespassed, because we have that information on the device. So if there's somebody we don't want to approach, it would just say call the police, and we call the police rather than approach them,
Mm.
and we would have observed them. And the good thing with facial that's happened in stores is that the police have got there in time now, because sometimes it can take police, depending on what else is going on in the community, a long time to respond. But
Mm.
if we're just watching them, and the police often have got there in time before the person's left, whereas before we'd find them as they're coming out, running out the door, or that they'd
Mm.
already left. It's much better if the police can apprehend them while they're in store.
Just a question around the human verification. So the person who's received the ping, they're holding the device. You then
Yeah.
request somebody else who's been trained. Is that sometimes creating a blocker? I mean, I can imagine a scenario where, an alert security officer is like, oh, here comes Billy. He's a known offender. But then the facial recognition pings. Is that then creating a barrier to that security officer saying, Billy, come on, no, you can't come in here? Or do they still have discretion to do that? They're not suddenly
No,
becoming overly reliant on the technology.
no, they have to get a verifier. They
So it
cannot
always
proceed.
has to be
Yep.
verified.
And if there's
Okay.
not a verifier in store, they're not allowed to approach. And we
Mm.
we audit all of that, so we know if that there's initials that have to go in as to who verified the alert.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so we monitor all of that. We also monitor how long it takes them to react to the alert, because ideally we
Ah,
want them to
okay.
react within 1 minute.
Hmm.
So we monitor that. Sometimes it's
Or
a
give the
yeah.
justification, I guess, as to why
Yeah.
they haven't. Yeah.
Yeah, if they haven't responded, why haven't they? Did somebody
Mm.
leave the device somewhere, or was it not charged, or
Mm.
so we
Are
we
you
do.
finding some of those little issues that need ironing out? I mean, the
Yes.
charging, we talk about that so much with body worn cameras that, you've got all these devices of cost, huge sums of money, and it's as simple as it hasn't been plugged in. So is that one of the issues as well that with
We
facial?
probably has happened less than 6 times during the trial that I know of, but you do know when you see a store, when we get an alert, because I get a copy of every alert, so when you see the reports come in the following day, how long it's taken to
Mm.
react to it, what happened really. And that's why
Yeah.
we turn the volume up too, because sometimes somebody would have it in their pocket and they were in the lunchroom and they wouldn't hear it.
Mm.
So yeah, we've tried to adjust. We've adjusted a lot of things during the trial,
Yeah.
because some things didn't work the way we thought they were going to.
The Office of the Privacy Commissioner, they produced a 75-page report. It's very thorough. What are some of the headline findings from that report for people who might not have the time to sort of digest all of that information?
Probably the main part for us was they felt that we were compliant
Mm.
with the privacy legislation, the Privacy Act, and that what we were doing was compliant, and they encourage stores, if they're going to use the technology, they look at what we've done as a guidance. They've released their biometric code now. They've asked us to make some changes to the system, which we're in the process of doing.
Okay. Anything
But
major? Any or
nothing,
unexpected?
no, nothing really.
Mm.
We we would have liked people's faces left in the system a little bit longer, because we only have till midnight to write the report on what happened. So if an alarm goes off at 5 to 10 and the store shuts at
Mm.
10, we've got 5 minutes to describe what happened, and then that
I
image deletes
see.
out of the system, because we're not keeping any images in the system past midnight of the day they occurred.
Wow, gosh. So there's no sort of 24 hours or so it's
No,
literally midnight,
midnight,
irrespective
it's
of
gone.
when it.
Yeah.
Gosh, okay, that
So
could
it
have
would be
put
nice
quite a
to
lot of
have it for a
pressure
couple of
on.
days. It does. It puts
Mm.
pressure. It does put pressure on people, especially if they're not security people.
Mm.
So yeah, we're doing some changes to the system, so there's more automated answers, because we've found them more free text you have, the more errors you'll get. So yeah, just little things. The technology is fantastic. It's the process that's the part that's the hardest to manage.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, the key thing, wasn't it, that the use of live facial recognition was seen as being proportionate to the threat and the risks of violence that staff within Foodstuffs North Island was experiencing. That must have been quite a moment to see that judgment come in.
Oh, it was. It's been such a privilege to work on facial. You know, it's been a great bunch of people that have been involved in it, and for it to be successful, as successful we feel as it was, and yeah, we're just so happy for the stores. You know, the people that work in the stores. There was one woman that was really the catalyst for starting facial recognition, and she was run over by a shoplifter and had both her hips broken, and it was very extreme. And that, you know, that owner went out and said, what technology is there that I can protect her? Because she wanted to continue to be a security person. And so every time you just want to succeed for people like her.
Yeah, definitely. And that dedication to her role, to want to come back as well after something so traumatic. What about the customers then? What was their view? So it sounds like the staff are very happy, the stores are very happy. Did you get much customer backlash or complaints?
Very little. Surprising, really. I think because we had fact sheets in the store. So if a customer had a question in the store, they just at the checkout, at customer service, the checkout manager or checkout supervisor would explain how the technology works. So you've seen the signage. You know, we informed all of our customers.
It's very big, bright yellow. Certainly not trying to hide them away at all.
Absolutely not. The more signage, the better, we found. And we were nervous about that because you're putting yourself really out there at the start of it, but it actually has been great to tell everybody. And then they got a choice whether they choose to shop in the store or not. But, you know, the stores in the trial, they haven't been affected negatively in from a sales perspective. You know, I think a lot of customers are very happy we've got the technology. You know, they don't want to go into the local store that they shop in and see anybody hurt or, you know, violent activity themselves.
And you did some surveys, didn't you, with customers before and after? And what did they reveal?
I can't remember the exact numbers now, but very positive. I think regardless of how successful facial was, I think it was 6 or 7% of the public would never be happy with it. But if it was 10% successful, I think it was around 80% of people would be happy with it. So we've had really good feedback from our customers.
What's your one recommendation or your one piece of advice for any other retailer that might similarly embark on the live facial recognition journey?
Use the technology responsibly, because we've been mindful. We didn't want to ruin it for other retailers that we wanted everybody to be able to benefit from what we've done.
Carolynne Ball there, some fantastic insights, and I'm sure we'll be all watching how LFR develops over in New Zealand. In Auckland and Sydney, I met Scott Harris. He's the Managing Director of Workforce Resilience, and they focus on delivering de-escalation training techniques into various organisations. And he talked to me about the importance of preparedness for when the unthinkable happens. We discussed some of the high-profile incidents that have occurred across Australia and New Zealand, including the Bondi Junction fatal stabbings that saw 6 innocent people lose their lives. Welcome, Scott. It's so great to have you on Retail Crime Uncovered. Now, Workforce Resilience, you focus on violence in the workplace and deliver training. From the UK, we don't necessarily look upon Australia and New Zealand and think violence, you know. So what actually is the context? What's happening in retail?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Emily. I think that it's not looking so good over here at the moment, and particularly in Australia. New Zealand has its major challenges as well. But, you know, I think the times have changed a little bit, and offenders are more inclined to use violence to evade arrest or to evade being captured or stopped when they're committing crimes. And they're also more inclined to be carrying weapons, but predominantly edged weapons. So that's probably similar to the UK, where I guess we're very lucky here that we don't have a lot of firearm offences in retail, but we certainly have a lot of offenders now carrying those edged weapons. I think we all hear the stats, and the stats are actually hard to quantify sometimes. I think there's a massive underreporting. So all the stats that we do talk about, probably, I'm not so sure about how accurate they are. So they're relatively good, but I find that a lot of businesses now, and particularly in retail, they're probably loath to report because they're just either so busy or they're not seeing results from, if they're reporting to the police or to security. There is one stat that I think is really important, and this is what drives us, I guess, and it's about 80% of the violence and aggression is from theft intervention.
Just going back to, that intervention being a flashpoint for violence, one of the things that was quite interesting when we were at the PPFF event together in Auckland, we had an input from the Minister of Justice there, Paul Goldsmith, and he talked about his plans to amend the Crime Act to give citizens greater power to intervene with shop thefts. And you challenged him on this to say, but hang on a minute, we've got this context of violence. People are going to get hurt. We need to de-escalate. Just tell us a little bit about that, because it's contentious, isn't it, what the plans are?
It was a difficult situation, really, because particularly over there, you had a lot of really high-profile retailers sitting in that room at the Profit Protection Future Forum in Auckland, and including Retail New Zealand. And a lot of people are petitioning the government around, can we keep our teams safer and around the types of strategies we can implement, facial recognition technology that you were talking to Carolynne Ball about. So all these people are in there and they're starting to feel really anxious because, as you raised, the minister's looking at wanting to introduce that citizens arrest legislation. And I think it's really, really tough when a politician is driving or pushing for something and has the ear of, the government, but certainly the whole community. And I think his intentions come from a good place, Emmeline. I think they really do. But I think he's a little misguided in some of the advice that he's following.
One of the really powerful topics that was covered in Auckland and in Sydney was the really tragic events at the Bondi Junction Westfield shopping centre, where 6 people were murdered by a knifeman. Now, the coronial inquest of that is ongoing, but you've got some learnings already, some insights into that, I think, particularly around just how quickly these critical incidents can unfold. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so in Singapore at the conference, I did a 50-minute session on critical incidents in shopping centres or retail precincts, and that focused on the fact that Bondi was literally 3 minutes between when the first person was harmed to the 16th person, and then it was 6 minutes in total from when he walked across that air bridge into Bondi, and the police officer, very brave police officer, all by herself, walked into this shopping centre. She was less than a minute away. So it was really fortunate that there was police nearby, and she's come in and she's stopped that. So if you think about that, 3 and then 6 minutes, it's actually a really short period of time. And probably we've been talking a lot longer than that just in this conversation. And I think the biggest thing is I would be loath to challenge some of the things, because I don't think any business could respond in 3 minutes to what was a catastrophic event. Now, I don't think we can say it's a once in a lifetime event. Unfortunately, as you've seen when you were here in Australia and when just in the news, we're actually having really significant incidents with machetes and knives all the time. Not to the extent that we saw at Bondi, but can I tell you, I'm really fearful for our shopping centres, which are those places where everyone gathers, and I just don't feel like we've got the right security, and we don't have the police working in them. And when I say the right security, that's because with the weapon they can't respond effectively, the current security teams, because then they're potentially a victim as well. And in Bondi, we saw one of the security guards, well, both of them being injured, but one of them being murdered by this person. So it's actually it's really challenging. So what we need
So
to
is
see
the
more.
answer to that to arm the
No,
security officers?
no,
Is that what
no,
would
no,
you
no,
like to see as a
no.
result? Because I think because some of this as well, I mean, as you convey, it's about when, not if, isn't it? It's about understanding that these incidents are becoming sadly all too frequent, and so having that preparedness and being proactive, working through scenarios, worst case scenarios, and almost building the muscle memory that, if something like this happens, this is
Perfect.
how I respond. Is that
Yes.
what else would you like to see in shopping malls in particular?
Yeah. So, well, to answer your question, I'd be concerned if we started to arm our security teams. I think that's not the right approach. Akin to, I guess, New Zealand, where they want to have that citizens arrest for security teams or anyone. But I feel like that's not the right approach. Security companies do a wonderful job. They're really great at that customer service interaction and going and trying to support when things aren't escalated to the point of crisis or those really significant incidents. But unfortunately, they don't have the tools to deal with those. And when if we started to put people in harm's way that don't have great training, and unfortunately, security teams don't have a lot of great training, and they don't get paid particularly well either. I spent 26 years in Queensland Police a long time ago. I left 10 years ago, but the training that I did, there was a lot of training, and we just continually got great training, and that's probably a big piece of this. The reason police do such a great job when they're actually there, or generally do such a great job, is because they do it every day, and they work with the most violent people and the people in crisis, and that's what we see, these people in crisis in our shopping centres.
Scott, it was so interesting talking to you. And
thanks so much for having me, Emmeline.
And now to the Insight 360 event hosted by Secura Global in Melbourne on a gloriously sunny day on the South Bank. And I was really pleased to do a Retail Crime Uncovered and Unplugged live interview with Matt Christie from TJX and David Haylings from Secura Global. Now, David has had a long career previously with Procter & Gamble, and I caught up with him on his insights on how better to include the brand owner's perspective as any part of a loss prevention strategy. There were really some light bulb moments in the room. David, it's great to have you join us today. Welcome. Now, the Insight 360 event was really about looking at crime and security from exactly that, a 360 perspective from every angle, and really talking about how we can better join up and collaborate with different partners that are relevant to solving this issue. So from the police right back to the brand owners. Now, given your experience, you were talking around the role and the possible input of brand owners. So what's their typical attitude to shrink? Why is this so important?
I think the interesting thing when you think about FMCG companies or brand owners is very often, probably only about 10% of that organization is actually going to be retailer facing. So 90% of that organization probably not going to know what the word shrink means. They're going to be completely immune to it, and they're just not going to be involved in coming together to kind of fight the challenge.
So it's probably fair to say that for most brand owners, shrink isn't really seen as their concern. That's if they even know what it is. Now, there was a real light bulb moment that you delivered during the Insight 360 event, which was about traveling back up the chain and really involving those brand owners in the loss prevention or asset protection strategy. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, so I'm a big advocate of this. So if you think about how we talked about the 90% of the FMCG guys that just won't be involved, won't know what shrink is. One of the groups that is involved in this, that isn't aware of what shrink is going to be the people that are designing the products, and more importantly, probably the packaging. And if you think about it, these guys are really designing for the consumer needs. So they're designing for the shopper, they're designing for the ultimate end user, and that's the most important thing. However, they also need to start thinking about how they design the packaging, about how it's going to show up in store. Now, very often you might get told that you have to design shelf-ready packaging, or you might have to design packs that are really efficient to operate when you're in store, so quick replenishment, that kind of thing. But I've never seen, or very rarely, we did in Gillette a bit, but I've very rarely seen anyone in R&D or packaging design or product design designing in anti-theft features into the packaging, which you can do. If you're careful about it, and if you really identify what you're trying to do, what you're trying to design against, then you can maybe design packaging that's going to work in concert with some of the anti-theft practices, anti-theft tags, anti-theft shelf units that are in store already. So rather than the loss prevention guy kind of finding the pack when it turns up in store and going, oh my goodness, how am I going to protect this? You can have that conversation way up front, and you can really put those two typically siloed groups together in contact, and then co-create and co-design something that really works kind of well together.
And I think because one of the issues as well around the design of packaging, particularly smaller items, is that then when you come to the tagging solution, it's going to obscure some of that really key branding or the special offer or something printed on the package. And it just seems so simple that, okay, let's have the conversation upstream and make sure that when it's actually then placed in the store, given its protection, it's not actually impacting on the brand. But I don't think this is necessarily an easy conversation to have. What would be your advice to LP practitioners? How do you have this conversation with brands?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to what we were saying earlier around the guys that are working on the packaging design. They're just not aware that it's an important thing. It's just not something that they're designing in. Now, if you get to them early and you explain what the commercial impact is going to be, or the upside commercially, both in terms of the improvement in shrink, but also the avoidance of your products maybe not being listed in certain stores, or reducing your share of shelf because you're so concerned that your high risk item is going to be taken from the shelf, so you crash the number of facings, or maybe there's an availability issue that's being created by shrink. All of these elements are going to have a big commercial impact. And fundamentally, the guys that have the power in a retailer, in a brand owner and an FMCG company, they're going to be the sales guys. So you need to help the organization, the brand organization, understand what the commercial impact, what the revenue impact is going to be in terms of, I'm not going to be able to list your product in stores unless you give me something, both in terms of maybe, I don't know, co-creating something in terms of the packaging, or maybe even working with me on fixturization, co-funding it maybe. These kinds of things are the kind of conversations you need to have. But basically, you get through the buyer. So if you can go through the buyer into the sales guy, the commercial guy, the brand owner, and help them really understand what the implications are of shrink, and what's going to happen if you don't really help us, or if you don't work with us on co-creation. Once they understand,
it sounds a little bit like there's a carrot and stick dynamic there, isn't there? So showing the huge benefits that are potentially on offer, and also potentially what the consequences are if they don't bring themselves to the table and try to collaborate.
I'd go down the carrot route. I don't really like carrots. It's not really my vegetable choice. However, I'd be going down the carrot route, because fundamentally what you're going to do with this collaboration is you're going to be introducing a mechanism that's going to grow sales. And that's exactly what the buyer wants. It's exactly what the sales guy wants. It's what the brand owner wants as well. So carrot, carrot, carrot.
David, thank you so much for taking the time out today. I'm so glad to hear that your jet lag has passed. I hope to see you again down under for another Insights 360.
See you soon.
Newscast.
Hi, Sinead. How are you?
I'm good. Not as good as you, though. I've not been in Australia for the past month.
Oh, well, it was all work. Promise. There was no fun and games at all. So this episode, we have been focusing on Australia and New Zealand in particular, but you've picked up on a more local news story in the UK, a new loss prevention strategy. What's happening?
And this got picked up by all the news outlets. An interesting new scheme by Iceland. So the executive chairman, Richard Walker, he went on Channel 5 News one evening and just announced this scheme. So basically, any customers, shoppers who alert staff to any kind of like theft that's going on, any shoplifting, they will get a £1 put on their bonus card.
A pound. Okay, right.
A whole British pound. Okay. Essentially what needs to happen is you go and find a member of staff and you say, I think so-and-so over there is tried to steal something, is stealing something. The person doesn't need to be apprehended for you to get the reward.
Wow, okay.
But you just have to report it, and then it has to be verified. How that happens, it's not entirely clear, but I guess they go through...
Check the CCTV, that kind of thing. Okay.
Exactly. Has anyone else seen anything? But like we say, the person doesn't need to be arrested. It's just sort of, to encourage you if you see someone doing anything like that. They say it could potentially reduce prices in stores because at the moment...
Wow, okay.
They're losing like 20 million a year to shoplifting. And then, of course, that involves increasing prices of food, like wages, all those sort of things. What they say is do not interact with the shoplifter. So if you see it, you just go and find a member of staff, but you don't go up to the person at all. You just, if they're...
So non-intervention, just be the eyes and ears in the aisles and then report if you see what you think might be shoplifting.
And and try and get a detailed description. So that will be all part of the verification process. So I just wonder, what's the thinking behind this?
Yeah.
Does it have the potential to work? £1 just doesn't seem
I know. I mean, the incentive of £1 doesn't sound... it's not huge, is it? And I'd imagine somebody who's going to be motivated to report a shoplifting incident would probably do it without the £1. But perhaps that signals to them that it's the right thing to do, that the retailers will support them, that the staff are potentially then trained to do something. Now, it's interesting. I'm going to go all criminologist on you for a moment because this is rooted in criminological theory. So there's a theory called routine activities theory. And what that says is for any crime to occur, you need 3 things. 1, you've got a motivated offender. 2, you've got a suitable target. So that would be the items that they're stealing. And 3 is the absence of what's called a capable guardian. And so this is what Iceland are really trying to tap into, to introduce capable guardians. They're just other customers that are in the store and they're going to take action. And so what they're probably doing by going live on TV is saying, don't steal from us because we've now incentivized all of our customers and they might just be the ones that are dobbing you in. But I've got a few concerns about it. I'll come to those in a minute because what are you seeing online in terms of the response to this?
Well, it's always interesting to see what customers think about these kind of things. There's quite a few. The whole point of verifying the theft, that's going to take a lot of time. It's not going to be just like a minute or two you're in the shop. People normally when they're going shopping for food anyway, it's a tight turnaround, isn't it? Do they really want to wait around to verify this for a single pound to be put on their loyalty card? What if they don't have their loyalty card with them is another concern. So people are sort of saying, oh gosh, I don't really know if that's much of an incentive. And on top of that, would you go to any sort of trouble for £1? I mean, I know there are things that are £1 in Iceland.
Yeah.
But still, it's just, it's quite a long process, isn't it? And also were they stealing something? Did I see it properly? Is a kid screaming around me do they, Mum, I want to go home?
Yeah. And also, I mean, you said, before it's about non-intervention. It's just, reporting what you've seen. Where's the safety and safeguarding around it? Because if you're seen then telling a member of staff, that potentially does put you in quite a vulnerable position. But also shop workers tell me they don't have time to make the reports themselves when they see it. Wow. So now the idea that this shop staff is now actually filling out other people's reports as well. It's quite a big investment, I think, in staff time. And I just hope they've accounted for that. It's not on top of everything else they have to do.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because a lot of people reference their local Iceland and they'll be like, there's one person on the till and there's one person stacking shelves and they're running between the two.
Yeah.
You can't not have someone on the till and you can't not have someone restocking. So if you've only got 2 people working in your Iceland, the person stacking or the person on the till, it's just it seems a bit much. The other thing that people are saying is this just a big PR gimmick? He goes on national TV and he's like, look, this is what we're going to do. And it's not really about lowering prices at Iceland and being if we get the shoplifters. It's all about sort of creating a sense that everyone's being watched. Yeah. And they're so everyone feels a little bit uncomfortable. So maybe they won't steal the things. But if you're a prolific offender.
Yeah. Do you know, I was also thinking, I mean, you could be quids in by following a prolific offender because, they steal day in, day out, every minute of the day. follow them round, make all the reports,
Yeah.
then, you know, suddenly your loyalty card might have quite a lot of money on it.
Or there could be people just getting like young kids to do it, you know, and being like, you go in it and then I'll go and get the £1 back. But I mean, are you like, I just think there are easier ways to make a few quid.
Yeah,
One quid.
definitely. I mean, it'd be so interesting to see how it plays out and whether it is enough to just deter some of those offenders, and they'll think, right, I'm not going to go to Iceland. I'm going to go to a different store. I mean, then you are just shifting the problem elsewhere. It'll be interesting to see how this one plays out.
Has it ever happened anywhere else, this type of incentive scheme?
So not that I'm aware of. There was something vaguely similar where members of the public could subscribe to a CCTV platform that would live stream footage from different retailers, and essentially they would sort of press a buzzer if they saw that somebody was shoplifting, and it would be radioed into the store that was happening.
Right.
And they'd be incentivised. So if that was then proven to be an active shoplifter, I think they used to get £10, but they would literally have to sit there and watch this live footage. Now, the way that got over some of the problems we've talked about is that you might be in Edinburgh and you might randomly be watching a store in Birmingham. So it removed that sort of potential for sort of knowing who had dobbed you in, or the potential for there being any sort of interaction with the actual
Completely
thief.
anonymous that way, isn't it?
Completely anonymous.
But isn't that just someone's job, though, to watch CCTV anyway?
You'd think so, but that's very expensive, isn't
Right.
it? To have, I mean, we've now since had a shift towards security operations centres. So a lot more remote monitoring is taking place because it is quite labour intensive. So I guess that's the sort of more contemporary sort of incarnation of it. But I guess, you know, these ideas have been tried and tested over the years, and perhaps this is just the latest one to see whether it'll have an impact.
Does it feel gimmicky to you, though?
Does it feel gimmicky? A little bit, but I'd love to know whether it actually does make a difference. I think maybe we need to speak to some offenders as well and see whether they would be concerned about having seen this on national television.
Yeah.
Maybe that's for next time. Sinead, thank you.
You're welcome.
Pleasure as always. So much to think about there, and we'd love to hear your views, whether it's on live facial recognition, critical incidents, or how brand owners can and should be more central to loss prevention strategies. Plus, if you've been enticed to shop a shoplifter or you've seen it in action, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for listening.